So you want to abuse the best killers in the game to get to the not so prestigious rank 1 in Dead by Daylight? Well then welcome to Iceman's comprehensive list of top killers. We're going to be starting it off strong with Nurse. Nurse's biggest strength is her long range pressure with her blinks. Her biggest weakness comes from the fact that her blinks are on a charge system. If you're playing against the Nurse, your best bet's going to be to break line of sight with her to make it harder for her to predict where her blink should land. If you are playing Nurse, the single best perk that you can run is going to be Nurse's Calling. That way you can get the aura reading effect, because everybody wants to heal up against the Nurse because of how difficult she is. Moving on to the next killer, we have Spirit. Spirit has incredible unpredictability with her power, but also that unpredictability is her greatest weakness. Unpredictability can be used against her. So if you're going against a Spirit, your best bet is going to be to bait that pallet and bait that window and then bait the movement that you are going to be doing. Bait, bait, bait. If you're playing as Spirit, the single best perk that you can run is going to be Sloppy Butcher to help slow the game down for when they heal. Pair it with Nurse's Calling for ultimate effectiveness. Moving down to the great tier, we're starting it off with our boy, the Nightmare Demon, Freddy. Freddy has incredible gen pressure with his power. He's very weak outside of the dream world, however. If you're going against Freddy, your best bet's going to try to keep yourself awake at all times. That means blowing gens up in your face, finding another survivor to wake you up, and pulling out an alarm clock. And then also, keep track of those pallets while you're at it. If you're playing as Freddy, in order to go super well with your power, go ahead and bring Pop Goes the Weasel for ultimate effectiveness. We're moving on to our man, Ghostface. What's up? Ghostface has a really good stealth ability that can completely change the way a chase is happening because he can remove the red glow. His biggest weakness is going to be the fact that his power requires him to stand still in the stalk, which does make him vulnerable because he can be seen. If you're going against a Ghostface, you're going to want to stay aware of your surroundings, and if you see him, just start running in the exact opposite direction. Try to burn out the timer of being exposed. And then also, when you're in a chase, at a loop, go ahead and control the chase while you're at it. And what I mean by controlling the chase is you're going to be the one that wants to dictate when you take the window. You're going to be the one that dictates when you drop down the pallet. You don't want to let Ghostface necessarily dictate that for you. So maintain control of the chase. That way he can't use his lack of a red glow to throw you off. If you're running Ghostface, I think that you're definitely going to want to run Nurses. Moving on to everybody's favorite, Daddy Myers. Myers' biggest strength is the fact that he has some incredible add-ons and is also incredibly snowbally. His biggest weakness though comes from the incredibly weak early game that he has, potentially one of the weakest in the game. If you're going against Myers, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to break line of sight so he can't stalk you, but then also you're going to want to stick to gens pretty early on. If you are running Myers, the single best perk that you can run is Monitor and Abuse. That way when you're in that tier 3, you can get 8 meters closer without them knowing that you're even there. Moving on to everybody's favorite upside down world monster, we got the Dibadeaux. He has good map pressure with his power, but it is slightly weaker than Freddy since it can be cleansed from the map. His biggest weakness is definitely going to be the fact that he's easily loopable. If you're going against him, you're going to want to bait out his pounce around loops to just drag him out a little bit longer. And don't necessarily worry about cleansing his power from the map unless it's right next to a generator. If you're running Dibadeaux, what you're probably going to want to do as far as perks is run Save the Best for last. That way chases end a little bit sooner. For our next contestant, we're moving on to probably the most controversial one here and what I think everybody's going to yell at me about. Billy. Billy's biggest strength is the fact that he has great speed around the map, and that speed is also an insta down. His biggest weakness though is he's vulnerable to the charge up time. If you're playing against Billy, you're going to want to bait his chainsaw out and you're going to try to hold on to pallets. And what I mean by that is a lot of times what you'll see is you'll see Billy's rev their chainsaw before you get to a pallet to try to get you to throw the pallet down. But if you don't throw it down, then he has to continue the chase. So bait pallets, Try to hold on to him, but don't be afraid to throw him down early as well. A piece of advice is try to get Billy to mouse 1 you. If you're going up to a window and he doesn't have his chainsaw rev, jump through it because he'll automatically hit you with that mouse 1. The next one that we're going to is going to be Plague. Plague is very strong because she can make all survivors broken. Her biggest weakness though is the slow early game that she has, and that she can be looped a little bit easier than others because she has to sit there and spew her vomit on you for the first 5 minutes of the game. If you're going against the Plague, you don't want to cleanse until there's 1 or 2 generators left or all the generators are done. And when you do cleanse, go to a dead part of the map. What I mean by dead part of the map is go to a part of the map that already has a generator complete. That way, if she does go over there to get her corrupt file, then she will have wasted time because there's no survivors and there's no generators in that part of the map. So it buys your team extra time. If you're playing this Plague, I think single-handedly the best perk that you can run on her is going to be Blood Echo, because with everybody being broken, that exhaustion that they're going to be put on them is going to make those chases a hell of a lot easier and shorter. Next, we're moving on to the entity's version of the machine gun, Huntress. Huntress is great because she has the only range attacks in the entire game. Huntress's biggest weakness, however, is she can be looped and baited pretty easily with her hatchets. If you're going against the Huntress, you're going to want to make your movement unpredictable. That way it's hard for her to land her hatchets, and put down pallets early in chases if you need to. You can put down the pallets early, that way she has to break them, and that way you don't get animation locked to doing so when she can hit you with a hatchet. But also, you can do what you do with Billy and bait out the pallet a little bit as well. Never go for a pallet stun. If you're playing Huntress, you have a weak early game and you struggle finding people early on, you are gonna want to run Whispers. Moving on to Dead by Daylight's newest killer, we have the Oni. The Oni's biggest strength is his great slugging potential, probably the best potential in the game for slugging. However, his biggest weakness is the predictable power. I think every single Oni I've ever played uses the power in almost the exact same way. So use that to your advantage. It may take a few games, but you can learn how to use loops pretty effectively against them. If you are playing against the Oni, what you're going to want to do is utilize windows. Windows, and more windows. Windows are what Oni struggle with the absolute most, so you utilize those when looping him, especially in his power. With Oni, you're going to want to play into your biggest strength, so take Infectious Fright for more slugging potential. Moving down to the bad tier, we're starting it off with Doctor. Doctor's biggest strength is the fact that his power can slow down the game a pretty decent amount. His biggest weakness though is the fact that he's easily loopable due to his lack of bloodlust. Just so you know, whenever the Doctor shocks, he automatically resets the timer on his bloodlust. If you're playing against Doctor, you're gonna want to play around the power that he has because it does animation stun you. So you either need to put down pallets early or know that it's gonna animation stun you, and that Doctors will try to use that, and then you can bait out a swing from them. So you can actually do a loop a lot longer against the Doctor than what you probably think. If you're struggling with Doctor, try to loop him a little bit longer before throwing that pallet down. If that doesn't work, throw it down earlier. As the Doctor, your biggest weakness is the early game. Go ahead and run Corrupt Intervention. That way it forces people away from the outside of the map into you. Next, we're moving on to everybody's favorite witch of DBD, the Hag. Hag has really good map movement with her traps. That's definitely her biggest strength. Her biggest weakness is that traps can be easily avoided because they can be crouched around and also destroyed with flashlights. And she's got a pretty bad early game because of how slow she is in the setup time. If you're playing against her, use the fact that she's a 110% killer. And if you see her, just start booking it in the other direction, create some distance. And if you ever see her put a trap down in the middle of a chase, maybe at a pallet, just turn and start running. Those 2.5 seconds that she wasted putting the trap down, that's time for you to escape. If you are playing the Hag, I think the best single perk that you can run is going to be Make Your Choice. Just set up your traps kind of a little bit further away from the hooks than normal. That way people do trigger them. Up next, we got Bubba. With Leatherface, his chainsaw sweep is definitely his biggest strength. It's difficult to escape, and it can be good to close the gap down. His biggest weakness is he doesn't have a strong early game or a strong late game. He stays pretty constant throughout the entire match. What you're going to want to do if you're going against Leatherface is you're going to want to bait pallets and force M1s, a lot like you do with Billy. So hold on to those pallets, throw them down early, jump through a window, make them hit you with a hammer. If you're playing Leatherface, your single-handed best perk is going to be play with your food. That's going to give you the additional speed boost that you need to get more chain sweeps off. Up next, we got the fat man himself, Mr. McDonald, the clown. His biggest strength is going to be his gas on certain loops though. Loops where you can still be seen over the top of them is not necessarily a very good loop. Loops that have a lot of verticality where the survivors can't see him on the other side, those are good loops for his gas. His biggest weakness is the fact that an early pallet drop can end his entire fucking career. If you're going against the clown, drop pallets at loops early because the days from the gas and the slowdown can really affect you. But if you drop it early, you give yourself one safe side of the loop, but then also the gas doesn't slow you down when you're vaulting. So drop pallets early when he's chasing you. Oh, and also try to dodge some of his gas if he's running you down. If you're playing clown, your biggest weakness is that gens can get done too quickly. Run a gen regression perk, like a pop. Next, we're moving on to everybody's favorite stealthy boy, Wraith. Wraith's biggest strength is how fast he is when he is cloaked. His biggest weakness also comes when he's cloaked because of how easily he can be seen. If you're playing against Wraith, keep your head on a swivel. That way you can see him when he's coming and position yourself properly within a loop. If you're going against Wraith, you're going to be looped a lot, so do something that's going to help cut some chases down and run Spirit Fury. Now we're on to the two killers that I think need to still be nerfed a little bit more. Starting it off with Piggy. Pig's greatest strength is her reverse bear traps, as they slow the game down pretty well. Her biggest weakness is definitely her crouch. Her crouch is completely useless and can be easily escaped from and potentially baited. If you're going against a pig, if anybody on your team is reverse bear trapped, don't complete a generator as that's what pops it. Go ahead and just 99% that generator. And if she ever crouches when you're doing a loop, just turn and run. Most of the time pigs don't know because they break their own line of sight when they crouch. So if you just turn and run, it'll make it a lot easier. Create some distance for yourself. Now, if you are running pig, you're gonna want some aura reading perks. Something like a surveillance should do really well. Next, we're moving on to everybody's favorite stabby teen, Legion. Legion's biggest strength is his power with the amount of pressure that he can put on. His biggest weakness though is he lacks any type of early game pressure and seems to be totally reliant on the survivors taking too long to complete generators, aka the game just dragging on. So if you're going against Legion, stay spread out and stick to the generators early so the game doesn't drag on. If you're going against Legion, you're going to want to try to slow it down. Go ahead and grab Thanatophobia. Next, I think that we're moving on to the absolute worst killer in the entire game, and I'll actually be dropping a video on that pretty soon about why I think that is. But we've got the Trapper. Traps can be extremely deadly when in the right place at the right time. Definitely his biggest strength. His biggest weakness, though, is the fact that his traps can be removed from the map. They can be disarmed very easily and they can be sabotaged very easily as well. Pair that with the fact that he has probably the weakest early game of any killer because he has to run around and collect those traps. You got a pretty big recipe for disaster. If you're going against a Trapper, you got to do a few things. First one, don't get fucking 3-gened. That'll end your life, and that makes the Trapper so much stronger. Don't get 3-gened. Be careful of the killer shack. Whenever you go to do a gen, make sure the pallet and the window closest to you, make sure they're clear. That way you have a loop to run if Trapper comes. If you're running Trapper, you're going to want to run the same thing as Doctor, Corrupt Intervention. That's going to force people from the outside of the map in, and it's going to give you a hell of a lot more pressure early game. So thanks for checking out the comprehensive list on killers that I created for you guys. I'd love to see what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Let me know if you thought I was right, if I was wrong. Let me know what you struggle with the most, either as a killer or a survivor against them, and I'll see what I can do to help. You can follow me on my Twitch as well, as I stream about 1 to 2 days a week. That's down in the description below. I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.